You know, they gave me a wireless microphone, probably because they thought I couldn't stand behind the podium. It's all right. I get it. I'm good. Before we get started, I can't let this moment pass. I know we've got Microsoft folks here in the audience. I know we've got some Yahoo folks here in the audience, but let's take a look at just the signage here tonight, the symbolism of Yahoo over Microsoft. I know they paid for the honor, and I think that's wonderful, but it's a wonderful thing to see. And I just wanted to point that out for all of us Silicon Valley folks to see Yahoo above Microsoft, at least for the evening. And we'll see what happens in 2010. We'll get there. We'll talk about it. This is a great night, and I do have, we have so many topics to get to, and I want to get to them right away because one of the things that I've been writing about that we have all been dealing with for much of the year is the advent of social networking, where it is, where it's been, and certainly where it goes from here. So I want to pose the first question. I mean, if you look, Brad, since you're closest, if you look at where social networking has been, we all understand the power of social networking. We all understand the reach, why it's so compelling. But there is a chasm of difference between what Facebook lets you do and what Twitter lets you do. Is it necessary that one survives in place of the other? And the valuations that we're talking about for these kinds of ventures, are we back to 1999 all over again?
Well, it's a good question. And you know, let's just acknowledge up front that if we had true talent as soothsayers up here, we probably would be picking stocks and not writing. But you know, I mean, look, Google, we know, built a tremendous business by selling advertising based on what people are looking for. Facebook knows who we are, what we like. Tremendously valuable for advertisers. Clearly, the company says that it's now cash flow positive. We might see a Facebook IPO next year. Twitter, which doesn't have a business model yet, knows what we're interested in. Conceivably, also interesting to advertisers. I think that's eventually one direction that they'll go in. Do they compete? You know, they say they don't, and yet the behavior of the companies obviously implies otherwise. They compete for the same talent. They compete for the same lawyers. You know, there's some interesting battles going on behind the scenes, and I think they overlap, but I think they can live together because they're fundamentally doing two different things. And I think they will both, despite your prediction, I think they'll both be valuable companies. Now, of course, the question is how valuable and to whom. But
you live in the world of the web?
I think so.
So, I mean, you seem to believe that the world is location, location, location. Actually, microblogging is going to be the big deal in 2010.
Micro-messaging.
Micro-messaging. So I guess you and I might disagree on the future of Twitter, but do we see more things like Twitter? Is Twitter, I mean, it's $155 million of venture capital and an eyeball valuation of God knows what, and there's no business plan.
I think you have to separate the technology from a company and a business plan and the money they've raised. What Twitter and Facebook represent is actually the manifestation of our society. We are moving from an offline world to an online world, and our desire is to mimic what we do offline, online. And Twitter is very much like going to a bar and meeting people and talking and always be selling. Like if you go into a bar, you're always pitching. You're trying to pick up a girl, or you're trying to impress somebody, or maybe kiss up to your boss. You're selling. Twitter is pretty much like that. But that just is one way of looking at Twitter, because Twitter is about communications. It is about presence. It's about letting people and the world at large know if you're on or you're not. And I think this is a very subtle difference between if you look at Twitter as just a service which has raised $155 million, or if you look at a trend which is much larger. I know there's a lot of people in the media here, so all of us understand that in a good story, there are 5 elements: who, where, what, when, why. And in many ways, Twitter is who now. At home is who I am. It's not what my email address is. That's who I am. It also knows, thanks to their new location API, where I am, right? Because I'm dialing from my iPhone or a BlackBerry. It knows what, and at what time I'm logging in, and it knows, what I am doing and what I intend to sell. So it knows a lot, except it's the exact opposite of Facebook. Facebook is essentially the same thing. Facebook wants to suck the whole world into their universe. They want to aggregate everything. And Twitter wants to do federated. And I think if you look at the two things, they are the single 2 biggest threats to Google. Like, whichever way you look at it, they are a new way of doing things, and they represent the single biggest threat to Google. Not Microsoft, not Yahoo, but those 2 companies.
Stephen, we've been around the Valley for a long time. We've covered fads, we've covered trends, we've covered hot topics. Social networking is here to stay. There's no question about it. What form it takes on its way to overall success, I think, is still very much debatable. When you look at Facebook and Twitter and Google and Yahoo and all the others who are trying to play in this, what in your purview is going to be the platform? What is going to be the form that you think this all takes? And does it gel in 2010? Are we at that tipping point, or are we still so early in the process that it's going to be years still before we see this really take hold?
I think it's going to gel sooner rather than later. The thing about Twitter is it unlocked something that we hadn't seen in social networks before, and that's because it combined social networking and blogging. You're allowed to make your expression open to anyone who wants to watch, and then that not only opens it from one person putting out posts, tweets, but the New York Times, and I just saw the London Bridge has a Twitter stream. And so I think, I just talked to someone out there at the airport. I think every flight's going to have a Twitter stream. So, and it may not be necessarily Twitter, though. Other places want to get in there. So if you looked at it, you saw what Facebook did this year, you would wonder, why is Facebook getting so freaked out by this little company without a revenue stream? Because they really changed the whole way they had their users post status, and it used to be just your friends, and it started really as a service which was protected. It was only the people in your college and then your business, who got to see what you did. And then all of a sudden they said, well, I guess it's okay if you appear in Google. Part of your profile appears in Google. And you wonder, why was that? And because they saw that unlocking into merging of the social with a public aspect of it, and I think they want to be that. In one of the papers that were leaked out from Twitter, at some point someone hacked into an account and got some internal documents from Twitter, which were posted on TechCrunch. Twitter said that they really want to be the pulse of the planet. And I think we're going to have things that are the pulse of the planet coming out of there. It may or may not be Twitter. It may be a lot of things all at once, but we have the ability to have something coming to your phone, your computer in real time to give you a sense of what's happening all over, from your family, your friends, and the world at large.
So just a couple more questions on Twitter and social networking, because we got a lot to get to. But Matt, you cover venture capital. Twitter has attracted an enormous amount of venture capital. Does this entity continue as an independent concern in 2010? Is the exit strategy to be acquired? Is the exit strategy to go IPO? I mean, we heard from Twitter's top execs just a couple of weeks ago, or last week. Time is sort of a weird thing lately, but a couple of weeks ago that they have no interest in being acquired, and they have no interest in going public right now.
Yeah,
what's your sense of where it goes from here?
I wish we had this guy Ben Worthen who kept saying, he doesn't understand Twitter. It's too bad he's not here because.
Well, there was nothing big in 2009 either. So.
I think there's a lot of confusion about what Twitter's about. So Ohm, I felt like coming back to Ohm and saying, do you really read all those tweets that are coming from all the people you're following, right? I mean, there's no impossible way, but that's really not the point. You have to differentiate between Twitter, the business, and the ecosystem it's created. It's a protocol, right? So essentially what it's done is replaced RSS for a lot of people, right? You used to have this RSS reader, and you select all these news feeds that were coming to you, but it was really inefficient, right? RSS actually went out to get stuff, come back, and it was it took minutes, and we were all pissed off about how long it took for our blogs to get to people. Now, Twitter is actually much faster, and you're going to be using it in so many more sophisticated ways than just Twitter represents. It's a company that has opened itself to all these other applications, all these other clients that are helping you become a more efficient reader, and there's going to be all kinds of businesses built around that, all kinds of ways to monetize it. I mean, you're going to have corporations that care about communications and want to subscribe to certain services, and then you're going to have people who want to advertise on Twitter feeds. So you talk to the investors. I mean, going back to your question about the investors, you talk to the investors, they are investing in that company for the long haul, precisely to give it as much runway as they want, as Twitter needs to get to a place where it can make money. So we're not going to see an IPO next year. We're not even going to see them worrying about making a whole lot of money next year, because they're already beginning to make some money, and they're going to get into the tens of millions, and then maybe probably the hundreds of millions by 2011. That's my prediction.
Yeah, one of the ways they're making money is Dell is using them to tweet coupons to people, so they get followers and then they get a payback. So that's one of the emerging models for it. But I think it's a long way off. If you think about it, offline advertising is moving online in a big way, right? But the bulk of that is where? It's still right in Google search ads, isn't it? Google's getting the bulk of that. Microsoft is now consolidating their strategy around search. They've been doing it for 5 years, but now they're really trying to streamline it. It's still about paid search, and Google still dominates that. The rest of this stuff, media, the business I'm in, we don't know how all that's going to pan out. Nobody has the model. Eyeballs, is that the answer? 2 years ago, get the eyeballs, that's the answer. I don't think anybody has figured out how to monetize this yet. I like his analogy of the long runway, though. Twitter has that potential, but it's too early to go out for an IPO. There is no real rock solid.
But do you run the risk, though? Let me ask you this, Connie, and then you can throw in what you want to say. Do you run the risk, though, of what happened to MySpace, where here's this company that's fresh out the gate, it gets acquired for an enormous premium in order to realize some return on the investment. News Corp overruns the operation with a huge amount of ads, turns off a bunch of people, gives rise to Facebook as an alternative. Does Twitter run the same risk that at some point somebody's going to step up and say, how long are we supposed to be patient? We need to see a return on this investment, and Twitter then gives rise to a bunch of other new competitors?
What a brilliant introduction to what I was going to say, which is...
Thank you.
I'm not a big tweeter. I'm not allowed to tweet for work, because basically what I do at Bloomberg is send headlines on our system that people pay for. And those are tweets, except that it's a funded model, if you will, which is why Bloomberg is doing so well. But I was just... that's a fact. I was just talking to someone, though, a longtime technologist who I can't say because he didn't want me to share his name, but when we were talking about Twitter, his comparison was to Pointcast. Does anybody remember Pointcast?
Sure. Yeah.
And think about that story about pushing news to your desktop. What a great thing, right? You get all this stuff pushed to you, and it's what you're interested in, what you want. And the problem with Pointcast was it rode this wave of popularity until other people replicated the model, or the technology bypassed it. Now, is that going to happen to Twitter? Or are they going to use up the goodwill of the venture community? I don't know. People are giving them, obviously, a lot of money. I just looked back at the valuation of Twitter. It's supposed to be $1 billion. So obviously, there are people thinking about this in ways that I possibly can't imagine. But Pointcast, Twitter, I totally see a parallel there and a worry about it.
Okay, I'm going to disagree with you on that. I think Pointcast was 15 years too soon. I think the pointcast time is now, as we have an information overload situation. Where you need pointcast is now. And I think in case of Twitter, lightning has struck. They are at the right place at the right time with the right technology trends, right amount of connectivity, right amount of smartphones, and they have the right VCs who are saying, you know what, I can give you $155 million, go nuts, wait it out, see what happens. Great companies have three or four trends converge, and great companies have a lot of money, and they have great management. And I think that's where Twitter stands out versus Pointcast. If I remember correctly, Pointcast hired a guy from PacBell to run an internet company. That should have told people that shit is gonna go down. It just, right? I mean, PacBell, I mean, they didn't even offer DSL, and they hired a guy to run Pointcast. You know, I'm too old to remember all that stuff. But in case of Twitter and Facebook, they're at the right place at the right time with the right technology and exactly what people need. I think that's the crucial difference in these two companies. And that's the same case with all great startups. They have to be at the right time.
Let's not necessarily a startup, but let's talk about another brand with a very strong management team that had one hell of a year in 2009, and that's Apple. And not just as a company, but certainly the trends that they capitalized on. Here's a company that started the year, people wondering just whether they would even survive. Apparently the CEO had some health challenges of some kind. You know, we all were trying to figure out how serious they were and what they were and what that was all about. Whether this company could even talk about a 2010. June comes around and Steve Jobs returns. Basically, through his absence, the company really didn't miss much of a beat. And here we are at the end of the year. Companies enjoying a rip-roaring holiday shopping season. The iPhone continues to sell. People can't wait to pay the Mac premium if you're Microsoft. People can't wait to spend more money on an iPod Touch. Does this company, is it operating under its own little world here, or is it a microcosm of what can happen if other companies seize on the same kind of trend? Connie, you spent a lot of time covering this company. Let's start with you.
Do I think that Apple is going to continue to succeed and do well? Yes. I mean, their stock has more than doubled this year in a year. As you note, their CEO took a 5.5-month leave of absence, and people wondered if he was going to come back or not. How many people have an iPhone? Raise your hand.
Wow. How many people have a Zune? Wait. 1, 2.
Is this the Microsoft table here?
Oh.
Hey,
3.
half the people at the Microsoft
You can't raise your
table have
hand
Zooms.
twice, young lady. No. You have 4, okay. Sorry, Connie, go ahead.
It's okay. So over the course of the year, I'm the Apple reporter at Bloomberg. I've had the opportunity to write quite a few stories about Apple and talk to people constantly about what it is that makes them different, why people think that they are unique in the industry, and a lot of it comes back to Steve Jobs, who has said repeatedly that when he designs products, that the model for the products, the user, is himself. He doesn't do market research. They don't spend a lot of money going out polling people and doing whatever it is that a lot of you guys help companies do in terms of marketing research. He just wants things to work the way that they want, and people appreciate that. Obviously, there's a lot of iPhone, I'm sure iPod and Mac users out here in the audience, and certainly that has shown in their numbers, right? Mac shipments, I started covering the Mac and Apple in 1987 as a small child for Macweek magazine. The Mac was always very unique, right? It was the other computer, very small user base. Apple used to say then, I still think they say now, that their market share is akin to Volvo in the auto industry. But the Mac market share today at 8 or 9% worldwide. Is the highest it's ever been, and that's expected to grow, partly because people who use the iPhone and iPod are now starting to see the benefits of the Mac. Are they going to overtake Windows, which has something like, 94%, 92% market share? No, but they don't need to overtake them. If every point of market share they gain is a couple $2 billion in sales, that's material to Apple. So they have a visionary who understands what people like. He knows how to sell it and market it. They have a team of people there that know how to operate the company even in his absence. That's what we saw this year. And they seem to have their finger on the pulse of where the mobile market is going, which is why all of us in the little video presentation talked about what might be coming in the form of a tablet next year.
So let me ask you this, Brad, because name drop alert. I was with Steve Ballmer recently, and very much. So it cheeses him to no end that this company does a garbage amount of business. It's a rounding error in the Microsoft environment. It's nothing. He was very clear about that. Nothing. Yet with their, I think the word was piss ante or piss poor. I'd have to go back and look at the tape, but something along those lines. Market share, fill in the blank of what product we're talking about, they command 70, 80, 90% of the media coverage. And it's by and large very positive, glowingly so. Microsoft can't command that to save its life. Is it fair? Does Apple deserve that kind? Are we all blowing it when it comes to this kind of coverage? Brad?
You know, I think we tend in our business to look at not yesterday's battle, but tomorrow's battle. And sure, Microsoft has tremendous market share on the desktop, but in the emerging markets on the mobile phone, you know, Apple's refighting the old battles and winning. I mean, you know, think of the biggest development for Apple this year, I think, has been the tremendous amount of developer energy around the iPhone. There are like 85 or 90,000 apps for the iPhone now. You know, Apple had to, Microsoft had to sweep in the late 90s to develop Office for the Mac. And now, Apple, the iPhone platform is far and beyond the most activity of any smartphone platform. And think of, there's so many things that Apple can do to that, extending the platform to a tablet, for instance, or forking the iPhone line. So, is there a mystique to Apple? Do we sometimes devote too much energy to covering it? Do they have very sophisticated ways of manipulating their press coverage to get good press? That's all true, and we know it's true. But it's a tremendous company, and on some of these key future markets, they're doing a great job.
But I don't think, Byron, that we would be covering this company if it didn't deliver, and God knows we'd cover them even more if they didn't. In other words, if you look at where the stock was in January, if you look at where the market share was in January, if you look at where the trends were in January, and this company wasn't experiencing exponential growth between then and now, nobody would care. But the fact is that quarter after quarter and holiday shopping season after holiday shopping season, this company continues to deliver. So I'm not, for those of us who try to cover this company and offer some kind of perspective and get nailed for it, I always hearken back to the fundamentals. If the fundamentals aren't there, then we're not going to be given the positive coverage that we're giving them. But the fact is, they've got over $30 billion in cash in the bank. Is it overdone? I mean, you're at a big operation, that USA Today, I think a lot of people read.
Yeah, we pay a lot of attention to iPhone and Apple. And,
yeah, so I mean...
some attention to Windows, and it's not for lack of trying on Microsoft's part. Microsoft is a major marketing machine as well. I think it goes right back to the beginning of the strategy that Apple took to control the hardware and the software. Microsoft went the licensing route, just kept the software and licensed and built this ecosystem and built their entire corporate structure around that, and then just got bogged down in that more or less, and just got bogged down in the program manager approach to marketing. And Apple did something else. I don't know what.
So, Stephen, you're obviously very familiar with iPod. You had that whole, I think there was a book recently
You mean the perfect thing?
Yeah, which might still be available on Amazon.com if you shop wisely.
That's right. With your iPhone, you could buy it now, right? And listen to it right there.
It's a small percentage that so let's talk about mobile computing here, because smartphones were a huge trend that we saw in 2009. From your vantage point, do we see that explode even further? Has it reached its absolute penetration? It seems to me that when you're looking at smartphone market share, phones that access the internet versus dumb phones that just make phone calls, the percentages are out of whack. I mean, there just seems to be enormous upgrade cycle growth potential for this particular device. Is that safe to say? Who then, if that is safe to say, who's the big winner in 2010? This is putting you, sir, on the spot.
Well, I'll answer in a second, but first I don't want to leave the Apple thing, because we have to keep talking about Apple longer. We haven't really fulfilled our
I was just
quota
looking
yet.
at, I was looking at my watch. We have 11 more minutes of Apple discussion to.
So I'll get to the smartphones, but I do want to say, when Will Durst was up here, he talked about the golden age for political comedians in terms of George Bush. Well,
but he also talked about that starter Negro thing too.
Yeah. Well, I'm not going to go there, but. But this is our golden age. We had a long, great run with Apple and Microsoft, and now there's Google, right? And now there's this triangle here. So there's Apple versus Microsoft, but there's also Microsoft versus Google, and now Apple versus Google here. This is like better than Twilight. So it's just going to get better and better and better.
You're going to show us some Wolfpack, are you? Yeah. Okay.
So as for smartphones, clearly Apple is going to get bigger. But I have to say, I'm impressed with the purchase that Android has made. Android's really come on strong the last couple months, and it's a little disappointing, I guess, for Palm. So they came out with a great product. They don't, and they really seem to have learned the Apple lesson about how to come up with a fantastic product, but they don't seem to be taking off. And one sort of thing which muddies all the waters is you talk about how far it can go, is that our products now have outstripped our coverage. So a lot of us use our iPhones, and these calls they drop like raindrops, don't they? And it gets very tough to use it. And a lot of people are excited about the Droid, not necessarily because it's got navigation, which is cool, and some other things, but because it has a different carrier. A lot of people get better Verizon coverage than AT&T coverage. So I think that one thing holding us back there, in what is an inevitable trend to more and more smartphones, it hasn't come close to peaking yet, is these crappy coverages we have.
So does that mean that Google has finally stumbled upon something that's going to actually generate them a new revenue stream? Because God knows this company throws a billion things against the wall, hoping something sticks.
What revenue stream?
That's what I'm asking. So does Android become the thing that Google hangs its hat on as the next generation, as we all move to our pockets as opposed to the desktop?
Google comes out with its products because anything which drives people to the web and the cloud is good for Google, because Google takes such a big chunk of all online ads that it's all good for Google. And if Google can grab a part of the mobile phone world and make it open for their ads, and people use Gmail more and their other things, that's really good for Google. So Google really wants to fill the slot that Microsoft has set for itself as being sort of the default software if you're just going to put out a handset.
Matt, from your vantage point, do you see that? Do you see now companies developing around Android? Do you see an enormous amount of venture capital flowing towards that kind of trend, or is it overblown?
Absolutely. I chucked my iPhone. I've got the Droid, right? So that was the quote was the Droid's going to bury the iPhone. But look, seriously, what that statement was meant to indicate was that it reflects the coming of age of an Android platform that is extremely competitive. And I would say that in 2010, there's a good chance it will overtake the iPhone in terms of market share, because what it's doing is it doesn't need to make money off of the platform, right? It's free to the manufacturers, effectively free. These agreements are actually confidential, but they're basically licensing this technology to the manufacturers. Motorola needs desperate help. This is a Motorola phone, and it's better because I can use the Verizon wireless network carrier, and I can make calls from my office in Soma that I can't do with the iPhone. I was chucking it against the wall out of frustration. This thing lets me use multiple applications at the same time in the background. There's all kinds of cool things that the Android's letting you do that the iPhone doesn't do. I mean, they've got applications talking to each other in the background. You have that Wear application talking to Open Table application on your phone. I mean, that's new. You can't do that on the iPhone, right?
But does it matter that Droid doesn't have an iTunes connectivity? Does it matter that there's no access to the 100,000 apps that the Apple App Store has? Or do I care that there are 100,000 apps versus 15? How many apps do I really need? Does it matter?
That's precisely the point, right? If you've got 100,000 applications, people keep saying, oh, the iPhone has 100,000 applications and no one's going to catch up. But who uses 100,000 applications, right?
Not only that, you can't search through them. I mean, how do you find what you want?
That's right. So we're getting back to the old Twitter, Facebook argument, right? Does the success of one lead to the demise of the other? No. I mean, we've seen this game 3 times before. Going back to the Windows Apple competition, right? You've got the Apple computer. You've got the Mac computer's success, and then finally, it dissolves in 2002 to a point where you think Apple's going to go out of business and has a $3 billion market cap. You guys are talking the development over the last year, but that company's over the last 6 years has 100-fold grown in market cap. It's just unprecedented. I mean, it just shows you how things can change.
Google has a grand scheme for this. It's to work in the Google apps. That's why they're trying to get that. This is what gives Steve Ballmer nightmares and spoils his breakfast every morning, is that they have a grand scheme for this on a whiteboard somewhere that's brilliantly planned out. The problem with Google is they have yet to execute beyond paid search. So yeah, they have all these irons in the fire, all these beta stuff, Gmail, and it's gaining traction among the technorati, like my son, who's 24, who's my webmaster, and he's on this stuff, and he does Gmail, Google Apps, calendaring on it. So that tells you where Google is aiming for that. I like your long runway thing. It's a long runway, but it's a runway that's getting more sharply in focus. And Microsoft is chasing hard. They're trying to get the search piece, and they're trying to stave Google off from coming over to the applications piece, moving it into the cloud, so to speak. What's the cloud? It's mobile. It's on your, just what Matt does every day, what he's doing at the table here, preparing.
So, I think a lot of Droid fanboyism going on. So just to make very clear, none of these guys, whether it's Motorola, Samsung, HTC, are going to make any money. The only person who's going to make money in Android is Google. Just happened in 1995 when Microsoft launched Windows 95. Everybody thought Dell was going to be a great investment. Compaq is going to be great. Pacific, Bell, or PAC, or some computer company like that. I don't even remember the name. I covered all of them. There were like a bazillion of them who were going to just destroy, Apple. What happened? They didn't do anything, right? Apple basically acted stupidly and destroyed itself for the longest time. They didn't do anything. And I think when you look at what Apple is doing, Apple is the only Silicon Valley company right now which plays offense. Everybody else is defense. That piece of shit, playing catch up. Playing catch up. You need 4 strokes to get to the same point, whereas you need 1 on an iPhone. And I hate the iPhone. Yeah. Trust me. I'm not even a fanboy of iPhone. I use a BlackBerry, right? So Apple plays offense. And that's why the market rewards them with high market cap. They set the standard, everybody else copies it. That's the problem Microsoft has. They don't have the gumption to take 2 steps ahead. Google is playing catch up. That's the thing. People don't seem to realize it. Apple is setting the agenda. When you set the agenda, you're always at an advantage. I think the model we all should be looking at not earnings per share. It is revenue and profit share of the overall pie. I want to know how much money Apple makes of the whole compute market. They make more profit than everybody else together. So that's the right metric. If I'm an investor, that's how I have to look at a company. It's like, if it can make money for me. I like the idea they have $30 billion, that they can go away tomorrow. Even if Steve Jobs dies, they have 10 years to figure shit out, right? I'm happy as an investor. You have to understand, that's insurance.
So
that's insurance. Look at this. What Apple has done has destroyed Nokia. It's changed Nokia's game, right? This Nokia, this giant company, is scrambling. Microsoft, it's scrambling. Everybody is just playing their game. And I think we have to look at the market from that angle and not what. On the Droid thing, Google is going to make a shitload of money through search and ads. It's not a new model, it's the old model.
You're talking short term, Om. It's a long runway. It's a long-term investment. Who's going to control the platform as our economy comes back, as our young people start small businesses, and as they need a tool that actually works, that, all the extra apps aside, what's the platform tool that they're going to use to do business like we're all doing here?
What I want to do is I want to make sure that I encourage the speakers to really share your feelings. And, beginning with you, Om, because really,
I'm holding back, man.
I'm a little confused about how you feel about the Droid and the technology involved. But let me ask you this. We're talking about the increasing competitive threat that Apple provides Microsoft, that Google provides Microsoft. We've all been around the valley long enough, and we've all covered Intel, always facing a new competitive threat from AMD or IBM or in the early days Motorola or whoever it was that had some new chip. We've talked about the competitive threats for Microsoft, Apple, Google, Yahoo, kind of. There's always these competitive threats. You look at where we are today, Microsoft still doing just fine, still making a boatload of money, a license to print cash, because you've got IT managers all over the world who don't want to make the switch. We're still talking about 6, 7, 8% of market share for the Mac OS against what Windows offers. Linux is out there, I guess, sort of, kind of. We're talking about mobile, Windows Mobile. We haven't even talked about that. We're talking about Droid and the iPhone platform, but what about Windows Mobile? We can talk about all this, but Microsoft is no slouch. Are they a slouch? Do they honestly, Brad, really have something to worry about now? Or is the competitive threat still a decade off?
No, if we could call up Microsoft's stock over the last couple of years, I think that
it's done shit for a decade.
Right, and
sorry, it's really been a lousy performer for a decade.
Investors think about the future, and there are paradigms out there that are very dangerous to Microsoft's hegemony. And start with cloud computing, apps in the cloud. Is
that 2%? Is it 5%?
Today, but at some point, those Office licenses might go away.
I think switching cost is high. Think about it. My corporation bought Vista, didn't use it, paid for the licensee. They paid for 2 or 3 licenses for Office for me because of our back-end system. But I wouldn't bet against Steve Ballmer or Microsoft.
Right.
Microsoft, if not, they might be third, they might fumble marketing, but right now what they're doing is they're consolidating their strategy around shoring up the Windows Office platform, the monopoly they have there, and they're focusing on search. In the past, they've thrown billions here and there at everything. They're not doing that anymore. They're bringing it in line. I think nobody on Wall Street wants to bet against them, but nobody wants to bet with them. That's it. But they're not going to go away.
And I think that people are happy with a 5 or a 6% move in Microsoft stock over the course of a year. Do you want to roll the dice?
That's why they started paying dividends a couple of years, 3 years ago.
Exactly. Okay, so let's, since we're talking about Microsoft, let's sort of transition, if we could, into sort of this new world order of, I was talking, another name drop alert, Julius Janikowski from the FCC recently, and I said it wasn't just a question of government agencies becoming more active, it seemed to me that the FCC, the SEC, the FTC, the Justice Department, and fill in the blank are becoming more activist, that this was potentially a serious threat for the Silicon Valley in particular because of all the M&A activity in this area, and particularly the blurred lines of partnership, competition, and the like. Connie, looking at where this is today, when we see investigations by the EU holding up the Oracle Sun deal, putting a lot of people's livelihoods at risk, when we see what justice in this country is doing.
This
exactly,
illustrates
I
it
mean,
perfectly,
you know,
by the way.
For me, it all comes down to resolution. And I'm a big 1080 guy, but 680 by, or 640 by 480 is also very good, especially where you're sitting since we're live. Or you can do that. But no, Connie, when you're looking at the current climate, does this give you pause? Is this a concern that under the Obama administration that somehow these agencies have been given a new set of marching orders to get far more actively involved in the day-to-day business of companies in this valley?
Yes. I mean, obviously that's been the case this year. I don't think anyone would have predicted at the beginning of the year that Eric Schmidt would have stepped down from Apple's board because the FTC was worried about a Sherman Act antitrust violation about interlocking directorships. I mean, I had to look up how to spell up interlocking directorships when I was looking at the story, but all of us who cover tech, that's something that we talk to analysts and investors about, and government regulators. What exactly is the role government is going to play? And they've been very hands-off over the past 8 years, and we have seen a lot more activism on the part of the government this year, and no one that we talk to, at least the people that I talk to and the tech team at Bloomberg in San Francisco, expects that government scrutiny to go away next year. It will increase, and certainly people who cover Google, I don't cover them very closely, can talk about the government's scrutiny of Google and how big an office Google has in DC of lobbyists talking to the government to get their position heard. Of course, all tech companies have lobbyists in DC, but there's definitely been increased US scrutiny. The EU and the Oracle Sun antitrust scrutiny is a little bit odd, right? Because the US had no problem with their the acquisition, and so the EU's position, people are still looking at, wondering exactly what the competitive threat that they see there. And so, again, a lot of the analysts we talk to think that deal will go through and that the EU, there's a little bit of posturing going on. There's a change in administration in the EU, so that's an unusual situation. But in the US, definitely a step up in government scrutiny. That was a theme in 2009, and that's expected to go forward. But
Stephen, does that afford a chilling effect of some kind? Does that run the risk of slowing innovation? Is it a good thing? Is it, you know, the government operating under the assumption that we are out there protecting other businesses, or if you're in the EU, we're supposed to be protecting the consumer, but we're going to lobby a $1 billion fine against Intel and put all the money in our pocket. We're not going to send it out to the people who were apparently wronged by Intel's antitrust behavior. Does this run the risk of chilling innovation, chilling market growth, chilling the whole idea of market cap increases when these companies get together?
It might chill illegal activities. I don't know, you know, there might be some innovative illegal activities that might chill. But on the other hand, you know, this is why we have antitrust, to enforce antitrust. There's two sides of this too. Your friend Julius, you know.
He's my pal.
Yeah, I know. Maybe you talk to him about the very positive side for Silicon Valley is that in terms of opening up things that have been locked down by big companies, the cable companies and phone companies, they're very pro-Silicon Valley in doing what people over here have been saying for a long time, is you got to open up these markets, you got to open up the mobile phone world, and looks like they're going to be very aggressive in doing that. So that's a really good thing for the people over here.
I think you're probably referencing net neutrality and this concept. Is that a role for the government, or are these companies supposed to be? I think Ohm might have something to say here. Watch this. Watch.
He wants to. I want to hear some more bad language, so I'm going to turn it over to Ohm.
Actually, I'm going to try and be polite now. It's like I'm going to make an effort to be polite, okay? I just have to point out FTC, FCC, all these Fs and Cs. You know, we pay their bill. We pay their salary. They work for us, not for the big companies. So actually, what the new FCC is doing is what the FCC should have been doing for last 8 years. Kevin Martin, a phone company lobbyist, became the chairman of FCC. And he gave away everything the phone companies needed. So for 8 years, we had nothing. What is Julius doing now? He's trying to tell the world that we make phone calls on VoIP. We make all our video is coming on from Hulu and YouTube and IPTV. So what he's saying is, guys, how about going from 1776 to 2009? He's not making a big radical change. I don't think it's activism, it is a sense of realism in the FCC. And FTC should be harsher on big companies. Do we even actually understand the implications of a more powerful Google? I don't think there is not a single person in this room who does. And somebody needs to be...
The Yahoo table does.
The Microsoft guys do. As it impacts the bonus, right? So, but it really is, you know, if I'm FTC, I'm also starting to look at Facebook, and why aren't they? You know, Facebook is, or you know, it's beginning to own our social relationships online. These are important things which we need the government
But
to
is
do.
the government in a position to even do so? It seems like the government is constantly playing catch-up to technology, constantly playing the role of, well, you know what, tell us what you think you guys are doing, and then we'll figure it out eventually.
You know, I think the more important issue is if they don't do it, then you know what you have is a mortgage crisis, essentially. And that is the thing. We need a very strong government body system which is actually monitoring every single thing. They don't really have to go and enforce anything. The threat of enforcement is the most important thing. I think if you really drill down, this is the first time in a very long time we have had public officials which are on our side and not on the side of the big business.
Just to, yeah, thank you for that. I was just going to get a show of hands. The folks in this room, how many people, since we're relatively early in the Obama administration, how many people believe that the government, these agencies, especially with what we saw in 2009, both for stocks and innovation, that the FTC, the SEC, the FCC, Justice, and so forth, how many people here believe, by a show of hands, that they are operating on behalf of the consumer/investor versus not?
Actually, that's 4 people, so that's pretty good.
I mean, but this is what I'm saying. You've got
How about compared to the
crickets
previous
out here.
guys?
What's that?
So wait, so ask the question because you asked them both at the same time. So how many people
How many
believe
people
that
here
they're
believe
on
that
our
the government
side?
is acting on behalf of us now?
There you go.
Okay, now we're up to 8, as opposed to the 4. But this is what I'm saying, is that we are looking at Google under the federal microscope. We're looking at Apple under the federal microscope. We're looking at Intel and Microsoft and all the big normal players that we've all been talking about before, not necessarily Facebook, but maybe eventually. Are we seeing a paradigm shift in that, and is it necessarily a good thing or a bad thing?
But Google... Yeah.
Well, you know, Cisco's an interesting, that's a real interesting situation, because here's a company that seems to acquire with impunity, unless you're Tanberg. You know, here's a company that seems to buy and sell at its leisure, and nobody seems to raise a question, and they seem to be the only one. They are M&A in Silicon Valley. Everybody else has to cower under what the government may or may not do.
Yeah, but Google is 80% of the market. That's a natural monopoly. Facebook is a natural monopoly now.
But monopolies aren't illegal.
But I'm not saying they're illegal. Oh, I'm all for monopolies. If I had a monopoly on blogs, I would love it. Trust me. Like, I have no problems with monopolies, but the thing is, the role of the regulator is to regulate.
Yeah, there
have
are illegal
to do
behaviors.
it.
As
They
a monopoly, there are illegal behaviors.
You know,
that
if
can't do.
everything was that great,
Absolutely.
You know, Jim, if everything was great, let's just get rid of the cops. We don't really need the cops. What are they going to do, arrest somebody?
Right.
That's the worst they can do. We don't need to. We are all good people. We'll not kill anyone till we do.
Yeah,
right?
I covered the
And that's the key
FTC
thing. We
over
need
the
these
past
guys working out
you know, from the previous administration now. Under the FTC, they pretty much gave away everything that the credit bureaus wanted in terms of how they handle our data, how they can market our data, and did no enforcement of existing federal laws that says if they make an error with your data, you have to have a way to fix that. The credit bureaus just created a big loop that they knew they could push people in unless you could sue them and had a lawyer, they had a great case, you'd be stuck. Your identity fraud, too bad.
Right.
Guess who was what was her name? Platt Majoris was the FTC. You know where she came from? Jones Day, the law firm for Experian, the #1 credit bureau that puts out the pirate commercials, because they now actually are selling back our data to us, monitoring our data, asking you for $49 a month. They made $300 million last year doing that under the type of lack of federal oversight that was in place for the past at least 12 years. So now we're just starting to move in the correct direction, Jim. That's all that's happening.
No, and that's, I'm not suggesting an opinion one way or the other. I'm trying to get a sense of where we were and where we are, and you know, this pendulum
That's
swings.
where we are. We're starting slowly
Well,
to swing
that's
back
the thing.
to
I mean,
correct
if the
direction.
pendulum is here and it's swung way over here, it seems to me that the pendulum is going back to the middle where it ought to have been, where it should have been this whole time. People doing their jobs, paid doing what they're doing. So since we're talking about the government, one of the big things in 2009, obviously, was investment in green technology. And we've seen just enormous amounts of money funneled to these companies on a variety of different levels, green energy.
There was a massive amount of money that went into solar and other technologies like ethanol, right, when the price of oil was high, and you know, you could have competing technologies, competing fuel sources, but then when oil goes down again, then you're hosed basically, right? The answer is that this is going to be a long investment cycle for green. So you're going to see peaks and valleys, but yeah, $11 billion going to efficiency from the government and to the grid. I think the Valley is going to only now begin to see the significance of this. When you're talking about Cisco, what you have is a utility system that hasn't really been changed since the 1950s in terms of the basic structure of how utilities work. And they don't have a very sophisticated communication system because it's been going one way. You saw my quote earlier when they were asking me in terms of trends. The trend is it's two-way. We all saw in California this great law that now allows you to get paid for the power you put back onto the grid, right? So you got solar panels on your house. Now you can get it on the grid going the other way, and you're paid for it. This is revolutionary. And you need a sophisticated communication system to control demand response, so prices go up, and you can cut it down again automatically in your use. And Cisco, we were talking about, has all that experience of doing that with IP, and it's now going very aggressively to create what they call the grid operating system as opposed to the internet operating system. And so I think the Valley is now really beginning to understand that they have something to gain here as well.
Also, do you have a thought to share on that?
I actually do. That's my job, man. That's why I became a blogger, not because I didn't have any opinions. Like, most people have one opinion, I have 5. So and that equals 5 blog posts, right? So I think the biggest issue, when you think about green and why it's important, you just look at your own house, right? You have many more devices. You're always on. You know, you're always charging your iPhone or whatever you're doing. Your computer's on, your TV's on. You know, a whole slew of new technologies are coming. All that needs power. And I think we need to invest in making the power grid smarter. It's like not even an option anymore. It just needs to be done. Otherwise, all these great gadgets will just be pointless. We won't be able to use them. You know, you look at Amazon's, server requirements are huge. Facebook's single largest OPEX is its energy bill. They pay close to like $10 million every quarter on electricity. I mean, that's a lot of money, and it's becoming a really big problem if you have to do IT business. So that's why this is a trend which is only going to accelerate, and I'm not so sure about alternative fuels or solar or anything. Just smart energy management is definitely a big trend for next couple of years.
So are there any companies that any of you have seen that we ought to be taking a special look at that have done something particularly innovative? Put you on the spot to name an individual company. And we talked about Cisco. I mean, they're the big bad gorilla here in the Silicon Valley.
I think Silver Spring is another company, which is a kind of quasi-startup, like Facebook is a startup.
10 years old. Yeah.
I mean, the ones that we've seen are both solar ones. The ones that we've spent a lot of time, Nano Solar and Solyndra. But
a lot of this is going to come from the big companies. You know, Alcatel-Lucent is doing this. Microsoft has a big effort in this arena. You have Nokia, Siemens is working on that. You know, even Google is working on that. Because everybody has to. Right? This is where AT&T has a big effort going in this direction. Almost everyone knows that is imperative now.
You know, we've got a few more minutes here before I want to open it up to question and answers. So what I'd like to do is, if it's okay with the panel, we got a sense of your predictions for 2010. Put you a little bit on the spot, but if we can go down the line, starting with Stephen, looking at 2010, we have seen some key trends in 2009. We've talked about some of them tonight, smartphones and Apple and antitrust and all this kind of stuff. When you look at some of the trends that you saw develop in 2009, taking some of those themes through 2010, give me the most important headline that you think we ought to be paying attention to. This goes for all of you, so poor Stephen is going to start, but maybe Brad might be next. He thinks he might be at the end, and he's got all this time to think about it. We'll see. But let's start with Stephen.
The number of electronic books and publications, electronic publications, we'll be talking next year about how much more of those there were. There'll be better devices to read them on.
So who's going to win? I mean, you've got Barnes & Noble, who can't make the Nook fast enough. You've got the Kindle, which is still a black and white screen, black and gray, the last time I checked. What's that? We love Kindle. Huh. Good, we love Kindle. Kindle's beautiful.
I think with 2000.
But you've got 17 others that are on the
2010. We don't see a winner yet. We see more stuff. We'll all win if they find one format that works on all the devices. And there better be a lot of pressure on these companies to do that, because right now the situation is really screwed up. That you can't, you have to worry about which publication you buy or which book you buy on which device.
Matt? Ha! Thought you were coming up later, didn't you?
Facebook figures out the email problem, right? So I spend 90% of my time on email. I define my free time by not doing email, and that's got to be figured out. We left that subject in 2009. In 2006, 7, 8, you talked about productivity tools, and Google's come up with something called Wave. Has anyone used Wave? No. Okay, you're still using it? Whoa. Wow, that's a lot of people. So I tried using Wave within our company and tried all kinds of productivity tools, and I just get turned down on every single one. So we're using a smattering of tools, but Facebook or somebody that has a social element to what they do, and they keep talking about it, that they're going to change the world with a social layer, right? So how do you figure out my email problem, right? So that's what I hope happens, and something's got to happen. I can't keep spending more time on email. It's got to.
Turn it off. That's a good idea.
Turn it off. Okay,
your thoughts for 2010?
I don't have a headline, but being a blogger, I have 5 opinions. I'll give you 5 companies which will make big headlines: Amazon, Apple, Comcast, Twitter, and Facebook.
What's Comcast?
Go out on a limb, Mom. Give it.
Well, if I had to pick one, it would be Amazon, but those are the 5 companies. That's the headline.
Okay,
Let
so
me ask Om a question.
Okay.
These are little
Comcast
startups
is
we
about
haven't heard of.
I know you write about net neutrality quite a bit. Comcast is about to complete its acquisition of NBC. Do you think that Comcast, a massive ISP, starts to look at the streams for pirated NBC content?
Sure. I mean, they have to. I mean, they're doing it in Sweden and they're doing it in Denmark, 2 countries where they never did these things. So why won't,
And so is net neutrality out the window?
Probably not, like, it won't go out of the window at least during the Obama administration, but maybe after that.
Sorry, you started talking about Comcast. I needed a drink. You talked about.
Hey, just
it's
so
really
you
good
know,
being with you tonight.
Jim,
Tomorrow's the big day.
Jim,
We'll see
be
what happens.
nice.
What's that?
Was that a
New
Brian
bosses?
Roberts tattoo you were getting, Jim?
Yeah. Brian Roberts. He is so good looking. I love him. So you mentioned Amazon as well. Why? I mean, I know they're having a great year and they are the be-all, end-all, but is it Kindle,
No,
which
it's-
seems to still be a rounding error, but everybody pays attention to
I
it
think
as far as Amazon's
like
business?
Apple, they play offense, right? They set the agenda for cloud computing. They're setting the agenda for ebook readers. They're setting the agenda for. I would not be surprised if they come out with a cloud music service, a cloud-based video delivery service where you can sort of like, they can go up against Netflix. They can go up against Apple. I think it's one of the most interesting companies. And I have to say, after Bill, Steve, Jeff is the smartest guy in the Valley. I'm sorry. He is the most interesting and the smartest guy in the technology business. He's always thinking 4 moves ahead, not 1 or 2.
Have you met Brian Roberts? Because he's also really.
Brian is awesome.
He is awesome.
Awesome, right.
Byron, your thoughts for 2010?
I think people are going to wake up to this rising cyber threat that escalated and scaled up this year, unbelievably so. And I won't go into it, but I think online banking is going to become such a big, huge ripoff for small businesses that they're going to stop doing it, especially after I run my next cover story. It's just incredible. We didn't go into it much here, but basically bad URLs, bad web links, they escalated this year. They're nothing new. The bad guys have just figured out how to spread them into Facebook messages, into Twitter tweets, into Skype, into Google search results. You really cannot trust what you click on. And when you click on it, they've already refined what happens next, which is you become a bot. You become part of the problem. You become part of the Borg that they control to do it again and to do these other things, which is try to promote fake scareware that you can't get rid of. And that's going to worsen. It's going to be, you really can't get rid of it until you buy it. It'll lock up your documents. They're already starting to do that. And then the banking Trojans, which I referenced at the top, they're getting much more sophisticated. It's not a new model. They've been doing this in Brazil for years, for 10 years or more. So they're just adopting those models to us. So I think, generally, I think we're going to have to do more on authentication and get rid of some of the convenience to do online banking. I would recommend you don't do online banking now, before next year, before it comes.
So who's the company that solves that issue in 2010? Who's going to be the stock that's going to triple when they announce the solution to this massive problem?
There's not going to be any solution, but the tech security sector grew 8% this year, down from double digits the last 5 years. It's going to continue to grow. I mean, it's because nobody can solve the problem because the public awareness is not there yet, and there's no will to do it yet. And the banks don't want to talk about it until you hear of the big cases like Heartland and RBS Wordplay and TJX. But how many are not getting reported? This is happening on a very large scale, and it's just following a curve.
Brad, hold on. We're going to have microphones screaming at us? Come on. Brad,
I think I think the free online news buffet is over in 2010. I work for the New York Times. I have no knowledge of what the company's plans are, but I think we do start to see some major media organizations start to charge, at least for a premium level of content, and I think we start to see some sort of Justice League of America type affiliations between news organizations where you pay one subscription, you access several sites, you get to choose maybe from a menu, maybe with a little antitrust pass from the federal government. Whether it works, I don't know. I can't say. But I think that's one of the major changes in the web environment that we'll see next year.
Since I always have to have the last word, dude, you're so delusional. Just saying.
Well, what am I what am I delusional about?
Oh, that's really good for us. Shut up. They're gonna start charging, and we're gonna take over that monopoly you want.
I'm not saying it'll be effective. I think for some news organizations that have good brands and good audiences, it can be.
Yeah, I see that. That same organization which sees nothing new is going to happen in 2010, right? So, just saying, man. I'm just saying, throwing down like that.
Look, as long as you guys are seated in your chairs and you're not going to lift them up and throw them at each other, I think we're okay. So keep going. That's good.
Yeah, we were picked because the last 6 journals was jobs.
Yeah.
And Connie, your thoughts. Take us home.
I feel like I should start with a colorful metaphor, but I'll leave those to home for the rest of the night. I think in 2010 we'll see more of the M&A activity that we started to see in the last half of this year, and so that will be part of the story. But that associated with that is what happens to all of these people who will get unemployed as a result of all of that consolidation that we're seeing. In 2001, when the industry went through this downturn, it took a little bit of while for the tech sector to recover. This seems a little bit more prolonged, so I'm hoping that a lot of these people who end up deactivated, or whatever the politically correct term is these days, start companies, and for that we need to see more venture investment. So those 3 things, M&A, the jobless recovery, and venture investments in startups, as people give up looking for jobs and start doing their own thing and starting new firms, could lead to another renaissance in tech startups.
You're not going to see any venture investment, though. I mean, it's on the way down, if anything. Just a happy note at the end there.
Om, did you have something to add?
No, I actually have to ask. I have a question.
A question?
I know, surprising as it might be. What about an IPO or 2 or 3?
Will there be an IPO? I mean, people are talking about Facebook IPO since they did that dual stock split as a precursor, possibly to an IPO. It all depends on the mood of the market, right? Anybody who covers Apple like I do know that sometimes it's not based on logic, it's based on emotions and the mood of the market. If you're unemployed and have been unemployed for a long time, and everybody you know is unemployed and has been unemployed for a long time, that's not going to lead to a really good mood, right? So if there's a lot of government intercession in a way that businesses don't like, that's not going to lead to a good mood. If the competitors, hash out and step on each other's turfs in markets, current markets, and then it causes a rift in sales of potentially potential markets that are supposed to be doing well, but then all this competitive stuff happens. Again, it all goes back to what is the mood of the market. So an IPO, as we saw during the dot-com days, a lot of those IPOs, right, were not built on fundamentals like revenue and profit. It was about the mood, what the potential is. So right now, I don't know what the mood is. I don't think it's very positive based on what I'm hearing and what we're hearing in general, although there are little bits of pockets of positive notes. John Chambers at Cisco just said on the earnings call he thinks the market is picking up. Do you believe John Chambers or not? It's up to you. I mean, I wouldn't bet against John Chambers, but probably his view of what a pickup is probably different than the unemployed person who's been laid off from Sun. So it depends on what the mood and how Facebook or whoever goes out into the IPO market sets the tone for the rest of the year.
Remember how the Google IPO changed the tone of Silicon Valley? You think Facebook does that?
Does Facebook change the tone of Silicon Valley?
When it goes public and suddenly everything just becomes...
IPOs are a question of timing. What else is happening at that point in time? We have a political situation right now with Afghanistan. Nobody knows how that's going to play out. These jobless numbers keep coming out every quarter and they're not exactly optimistic. They've got to pick their moment, right?
And there's the whole Tiger Woods thing. You know, that plays into it. So
you're right. So
you just never know.